So today we are going over how to manage actual weight. So that's obviously a big part of our conversation. I know that like sometimes we use that as our sort of default example for like a lot of clients. Not every client is necessarily going to show up trying to lose weight or gain weight or even increase like their strength and stuff. Some people are just doing it for general health. Some people are doing it for, performance in like whatever sport they're playing. But a lot of times we will have a lot of clients who are interested in changing their body composition. So they are interested in weight management. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So our objectives, right? We want to understand like what some of the common weight management concerns are. So like when people say they want to lose weight, what do they mean? Like versus like what do they really mean? I guess. Like when we're talking about like somebody who is trying to alter their body composition, it could be because they want to look better in like a dress that they got to wear to like a wedding in a couple months. It could be because maybe some guy's trying to fit into some specific pants, right? It could be somebody who's just trying to look better and feel more confident, right? Or maybe it's somebody who's trying to gain weight, right? I'm trying to pack on a couple pounds of muscle. So those are some of the concerns that we're going to talk about. What are the prevalences of overweight and obesity? We are going to discuss that again. I know we talk about that often and probably too often, but we are going to go over that really quick. And then we're going to talk about some of the methods that we use to determine a client's actual weight status. Obviously, there is number of pounds, but we also have to look at like their pounds versus like their height. That's their BMI, or maybe we look at their circumference measurements. Understand body composition. And then we will talk about the components of energy intake. So we'll talk about like, calories in versus calories out and what implications that has and what it means. What happens. We will talk very briefly, I think at the very end, actually. Is it even on here? Yeah, actually, I don't think we put it in the notes because we don't really get tested on it until capstone. But what about like disordered eating patterns? We'll talk about that really briefly. So when it comes to weight management, right, then the biggest reason people are sort of like, most clients who are walking into the gym, right, they're doing it for like an overall improvement in like their aesthetics or maybe their appearance, right? Maybe that's a reason for them. They just want to look a little bit better and feel a little bit more confident. It could also just be somebody who's trying to improve their overall health. We know that like if you have cholesterol problems, losing even just 10% of your body weight can have a massively positive impact on blood cholesterol levels. So we are obviously a big fan of that. If their doctor said, hey, we want you to, drop a few pounds so we can get you to improve your body composition, improve your blood lipid profile, things like that. They're trying to maybe achieve like their ideal weight. Maybe they don't necessarily care like what they look like. They're like, I just care about my health. I just want to be like right in the middle. And then maybe sometimes it is related to sports performance, like you look at like what they do to friggin' high school football players, or I'm sorry, college football players going into the NFL. They eat a bajillion calories, so they blow up in their first year, like that sometimes is, going to help improve that performance. Clay Matthews, man, that guy, I think he played for USC and then he went to the Packers, but like Clay Matthews before, after, I mean, he blew up in like 1 year. I mean, he was a normal, skinny looking high school dude like that. And then went into the freaking NFL. Like his arms are like the size of his old thighs. Like dude blew up overnight. That's sometimes, that's going to take an excess of energy, right? So we have to kind of be able to analyze that and look at it. So talking about just obesity before we kind of break into the numbers, obviously we have that body mass index. Again, I know we've talked about this a million times, but what it is by definition is just a way for us to categorize individuals based on their body composition by looking at their height versus their weight. So their BMI is going to be their weight in kilograms divided by their height in meters squared. If you wanted to do this with like the American formula, you could do BMI equals weight in pounds divided by, I can't remember what the divide symbol is. Copy, paste. Divided by their height in inches squared. And then you would take that whole thing and multiply it by 703. Okay, so that's the other way that we can also like kind of calculate this out. It can be weight in pounds divided by height in inches squared times 703, right? So a little bit different formula there. Both of them are going to give you your BMI, okay? The one they'll test you on though is kilograms divided by height in meters squared. They won't ask you this on your test. So ideally, our BMI is going to be somewhere between 18.5 and 24.9. If it's 25 or higher, that is in the overweight category until you hit 30. And then 30 or higher is considered obese. So we know that there are some health risks associated with being overweight, but the health risks associated with obesity are much, much, much higher. And that is definitely something, we are trying to sort of help our clients avoid. And we know that like in the world of athletics, by the way, the incidence of overweight and obesity is relatively low when you look at like overweight status compared with like normal people. So obviously like being physically active has a very positive impact. I know a lot of high school athletes, and a lot of like high school athletes will be in really good shape throughout like high school. And then even college athletes will be in really good shape because they're just burning a lot of calories, like going to practice and like doing this and doing that. And then like they'll get into like the real world, start working a 9-to-5 job and put on like a bunch of weight because, like all of a sudden, like your eating habits are the same, but your energy expenditure is drastically lower, especially if you take like a friggin' desk job, So that's definitely a part of this as well. So, your status may be like, overweight in like a specific like sport, but like maybe your body composition puts you in a normal place, but then like that body composition starts to shift as your lifestyle does, So health risks of being overweight, we know that there's a lot of them, right? Significant morbidity and mortality, just everything is attacks a little bit harder, That's one of the statistics we've seen during like COVID. I mean, like COVID's, death rate was relatively high, but like it was much higher in obese populations. Hypertension is associated with obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, like just plaque and cholesterol buildup on blood vessels, arthritis or osteoarthritis, not necessarily like rheumatoid arthritis, but osteoarthritis is associated with obesity because, everything is just a little bit more impact, and so that gradual wear down of the tissues within our joints, starts to occur. Respiratory problems. I've known plenty. I've actually helped several clients who have lost substantial amounts of weight with like sleep apnea. Sleep apnea, if you don't know what that is, it is where you will actually stop breathing in the middle of the night and then all of a sudden do like a big gasp. And it's really like kind of scary if you've ever been around it. Like I've never like slept with anyone who has like sleep apnea, because sometimes it can be hormonal as well. And so you'll see it in like a lot of different populations. I've never like been sleeping near someone but I've watched like videos of it, and it's scary looking. And every client that I've talked to who's like spouse or whatever, it's frightening, because you're just like, you're laying next to someone and they're breathing normally, and then all of a sudden they just stop breathing. And then all of a sudden they go, because their body goes, whoa, we need oxygen, and that's why a lot of times people will use like a CPAP machine, which will basically like breathe for them while they're, or at least like, pick up the slack while they're sleeping. Now that's obviously, like I said, very associated with like hormonal problems. But with obesity, if and we've actually seen it, you'll see it sometimes in like power lifters, bodybuilders as well. Even just like some of the like really strong people, because just like a heavy body just kind of weighs that rib cage down, and your diaphragm is not a muscle that you get to work out, like, so it's if you don't strengthen it, it has a really hard time kind of keep pumping while you're asleep. Certain types of cancers obviously associated with obesity. Again, when we think about like what cancer is, right, it's an abnormally aggressive growth of non-functional cells, right? If you have more cells in your body and you have more stuff in your body just kind of passively laying around, that can lead to an increased risk of different types of cancers. I will say there's a little bit of bias in that data, like the habits that you eat, like the habits associated with obesity, I think cross over with some of the habits that exist with like eating poorly, that's more likely the cause of like cancers. So I definitely think there's some like survey bias in there, but it is absolutely, we've seen the statistics, so it is something to be aware of. And then there is psychological issues, that's a risk, right? Emotional, social trauma. People are the worst sometimes, especially on the internet. Actually, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the show. Has anybody in here ever watched The Good Place? Have you ever watched it? It's on NBC, or was on NBC, 4 seasons. It's on Netflix now. If you guys get a chance, it is incredible. It's a sitcom about this woman who gets into heaven, and then she knows that she's not supposed to be there because she was not like a nice person. And so she's trying to like learn how to be a good person so that she can stay in heaven. It's really actually a pretty cool, really fun meta show. But one of the characters on that is this woman, Jamila Jamil, who is and a beautiful actress, tall, and like all the jokes in the show are about how beautiful she is. But she has done, like, her entire social media is like all about just like how to overcome like some of the psychological traumas that come along with like struggling with your weight or struggling with your body appearance, like learning how to accept yourself. And it's pretty cool. She's a really fun one to follow. Jamila Jamil. Shout out to her. All right. So they just announced she's going to be in the new She-Hulk show, which is kind of cool. For those of you who are Marvel nerds. Maybe not this target audience. All right. So what's our algorithm? How do we, if we're looking at, treating obesity, obviously we need to be able to figure out, like, we need to determine obesity, right? And so, yes, there is the BMI formula, right? Calculate out your client's BMI. So that is something that we will often do with nutrition consultation sessions. If you get hired, not even to train somebody, but they just want to know, like you are getting hired to like improve their weight because maybe you are just working in the realm of nutrition, you are still going to need to know what their baseline stats are. And so we are going to, determine their BMI, determine that body mass index, and then use that to determine like whether or not they fall into normal ranges. Now, let's say you have a client who does fall outside of normal ranges. Does that mean that they are at increased risk of certain diseases? Maybe not necessarily, right? Or maybe they fall within a normal BMI, but they also have like some other things that indicate that they probably, aren't necessarily all that healthy. So what we're going to look for are actual circumference measurements as well. This can also be a very good indicator of body composition, right? And so one of those things is going to be like, encouraging our clients to be within like a normal like waist circumference, right? So when we're looking at that, right, we're going to calculate body mass, or sorry, actually, last one as well. We are also going to look at body fat percentage. Those are all going to be indicators, and again, like being in an obese category is an increased risk of disease. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee. Again, I always point this out. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he won the award for being the most in shape person in the world, literally was considered morbidly obese, like the day he competed. So that goes to show you, and he was, in great shape. And he's in great shape now. Friggin' Arnold is still kicking, like walking around like a friggin' monster. Did you guys see, Cody, I think you and I were talking about this once, maybe. But did you guys see where Arnold Schwarzenegger was like, he was at like an Australian high school or something, and he was talking, and some kid like drop kicked him. Like some kid just went running and then like two legs like kicked Arnold Schwarzenegger in the back. Did you see that?
Yeah, it was all over YouTube.
It was wild, right? And he was just kind of like, he was like, huh? And then like security came in and like ripped that kid away, you know, like, cause he obviously had security there and stuff. And they were like, you just got attacked. But like Arnold was like, what? And he was like, you got up. This dude, I mean, how old is Arnold? Is he in his 70s now? I'm never gonna be able to spell that. 73 years old. And he was just like, what the heck? Don't do that. You know, if I got drop kicked, I'd be on the ground, you know. So I love that. I think that was if you get a chance, look up that video. It was wild. So you know, are you at risk when you are, you know, outside of normal BMI ranges? Maybe. That's why we need to take a look at some other data, and then either confirm or, you know, deny those circumstances. So one of the things we're going to look at is also a waist circumference measurement. So when you are measuring your client's waist circumference, I am not a big fan of this passively. I mean, like, it actually does make sense because, like, we know about how big, you know, human bones are. We know about how big like someone's general waist is. This, I would say, is the weakest in terms of like determining someone's health status, though. In terms of just saying, hey, your waist should be below this many number of inches. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that, just because, like, obviously, again, like, you could have like a rockin' six pack and like maybe that, you know, is you've got a huge abdominal wall. All right, man, that's gonna throw off those measurements a little bit. But again, like, as a general rule of thumb, what we're looking for when we're measuring someone's waist, you are always going to take this measurement at the narrowest part of their waist as viewed from the front. So when you look at waist measurement and you are looking at it from the anterior view, right, you want to go for the widest, or sorry, the narrowest portion. If there is no apparent narrowing, which is pretty common in like guys, you're just going to go right to the belly button. But for the most part, when you are looking at it, you go to the narrowest part of the waist, right? Looking for how often people are going to probably do this wrong. That one's actually lining up. Usually it's people who go, yeah, like this. That's like low, that's below. I mean, that's an animated picture, but yeah, so you do, there we go. That's actually, look at that. That's pretty much flat overall. So yeah, you just pretty much, where the client, like, I mean, actually, I guess there's like a little flare there. Yeah, I'd say narrowest part of the waist. That's good. But it is like sort of a judgment call, right? But you go to the narrowest part of the waist every time. For men, we want that to be below 40 inches or less than 102 centimeters. And for women, we want that to be less than 88 centimeters or less than 35 inches. Those are sort of our classic versions there. Now, aside from that, so that's weird. Why are they putting, yeah, here's our obesity ranges. We've seen those. And by the way, here's, like I said, like our increased risk of like obesities, right? We know like the risk for type 2 diabetes, hypertension, cardiorespiratory problems are much, much higher in these categories here. But then we're also seeing like, here is our, you know, waist circumference measurements, right? Now, if you had a client who falls into the overweight category, but maybe they're like, circumference measurements are actually relatively normal, is that person at increased risk? Probably not, right? This is, again, why we take multiple points of data. But yeah, once we see like extreme obesity, we do see, you know, the risk of disease is like, you know, greater than or equal to 40 inches. If you also are overweight and you have a waist circumference above that, that puts you at increased risk, right? So that's basically what we are looking at there and analyzing, right? You know, you may be increased, you have a high risk if it's actually above that much, right? You're at higher risk if you're, you know, obese in terms of health risk. But if your waist circumference measurement is still like relatively normal, the risk is a little bit higher. But like, again, we're just checking boxes, right? The way I always like explain this to my clients, because sometimes people will get so wrapped up in their numbers and they'll be like, you know, really, they'll be like, oh, really concerned about this and that. the way I like to kind of describe it is like picture each of these scenarios as like a different chip on a roulette table. You know, it's not like if you place one chip down, you're guaranteed to win. It's not like if you have one of these statistics outside of normal healthy ranges, you're absolutely going to deal with like hypertension or coronary heart disease. But it is an increased chance. It's an increased risk, you know? That's the approach we want to kind of have when we're looking at these things. You know, I've known so many clients who are considered obese, who are in fantastic shape and have better blood work than, you know, other clients of mine. Now, one of the ways that is actually very effective though at measuring measurement. So we look at the narrowest part of the waist. And another thing we are going to look at is the widest part of their hips. So if you take those two measurements with your client, right, you take them in, test them on the scale, get their height, right, figure out their BMI, then you do their waist circumference. Afterwards, you're going to follow that up with a hip circumference measurement. And what you're going to do is you're going to compare those numbers together. You're going to compare their waist divided by their height. And that can be in inches or it can be in centimeters. Do whichever version you want to do. It doesn't really matter. Both units are the same. It's inches. Just don't do like centimeters for the top and inches for the bottom. That would be a super weird thing to do. But when we look at that waist to hip ratio, this is a comparison of the waist girth to the hip girth. And this is showing you like where that body fat is distributed. We know there is a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, a higher risk of diabetes, a higher risk of hypertension associated with waist to hip ratios that are outside of these numbers right here. So ideally for men, we want to have a waist to hip ratio that is less than 0.91. And then for women, we want that waist to hip ratio to be less than 0.8. Okay. So that kind of indicates, you'll see generally like, you know, they call it an apple or like a pear shape, or it'll be like an android or a gynoid shape. You know, these are kind of the differences here. This apple shape is much more associated with an increased risk of diseases. This is part of the reason why men tend to die from heart disease more often. Now, why is that happening like physiologically? Well, the theory is that, and honestly, actually, it's not even, I mean, yeah, the working sort of evidence is abdominal obesity is just much more dangerous than just generally distributed body fat. You know, like we need body fat. It is an insulator in our body. Again, we need fat to produce hormones. Like we like having some body fat. But when it is all bunched up or in the abdomen and like sitting there surrounding all of our organs, it starts to have some unique characteristics. It starts to, it starts to act like an organ of its own. You know, it's not an organ, but it is like a giant lump of tissue. And that's kind of like, you know, that's kind of what organs are. But it doesn't do anything. It just starts to have like, and it starts to have its own metabolism. It really, you know, starts to cause like a lot of health problems. You know, increasing or decreasing your insulin sensitivity, all kinds of really negative stuff. So ideally, when we're looking at this, if we look at a waist to hip ratio, right? When we look at our clients, right, you can see if you measure this person here, right, their waist is 80 centimeters and their hips are 100 centimeters. That puts their waist to hip ratio at 0.8, which is exactly sort of what we're going for there. So that is definitely something we are going to see. Now, I will say this picture is actually indicating something that is kind of flawed about the waist to hip ratio, which is like, does that mean that this person is really healthy? Maybe, but this person over here also has a waist to hip ratio of 0.8, but their waist is 100 and their hips are 25. Their BMI is 35, right? So this person is class 2 obese, right? Whereas this person is considered like a normal weight category. This person still has a normal waist to hip ratio. So what does that indicate to us? It's like, well, that means that like, that doesn't necessarily mean that this person is clear and free of any like health related conditions associated with obesity. But what it does indicate is like the way their fat is distributed in their body is fairly even. So they may actually be at a decreased risk compared with someone who also has a BMI of 35 and a waist to hip ratio that is maybe a little bit worse, shows more abdominal fat. So that's what's kind of interesting about those numbers. Again, like 35 is pretty high. If I had a client who was like a 35 obesity, like that's probably not in the best shape, like, I mean, there's muscle mass and all, but like that's pretty substantial. Actually, we were talking about him the other day, Eddie Hall, body weight and height. He's 6'3". There's no way Eddie Hall's 6'3". Really? 362 pounds. All right, 362 divided by 2.2. Actually, you know what? I want to do the dumb American one. Divided by 75. Wow, shoot. 75 times 75. Okay. 362 divided by 5625 times 703. 45. All right. So yeah, he would be considered very obese. But he's in terrific shape. I mean, like, he may be a big dude, but like that is the world's strongest man. Like that's fascinating. So take it all with a grain of salt, and then lastly, there is body composition assessments, right? When we're looking at body composition, this is something that our clients are going to want to know their statistics on, okay? So your body composition is, what are all the components that make up your overall body, right? What is your body fat? What is your muscle mass? And what is your bone mineral percentage? That one is hard for us to calculate, but like, there are certain methods out there that can do it. So what we are going to look at when we're calculating someone's like fat mass, like I said, we're going to do a lot of math today. Their fat mass is the, essential fat in their body, but also any like stored fat in like adipocytes, right? So when you consider like your essential body fat, that's the fat that's like very important for like physiologic function, right? Again, we need to have a certain amount of body fat. Women need to have more than men do, right? This is why a healthy body fat percentage for men is somewhere between 10 and 20%, and for women is between 20 and 30%, right? Those numbers are very different. And that's some general numbers. You'll hear women are sometimes 18 to 28 is actually considered normal. But that's your essential body fat. When you get below that, it puts you at an increased risk for certain, other types of diseases. And then there's your non-essential body fat, which is all the extra stuff. There's all the stuff that's actually found in adipocyte, fat cells. When we're calculating out this number, if you determine a client's body fat percentage, and you can do that in a lot of different ways, there's obviously, like we look down here, there is, bioelectric impedance, which is the, classic where it zaps you basically. You don't really feel it, but like, you're holding on to that little electrodes, or maybe it's just going through like your feet on like a scale or whatever, and it's sending an electric current through the body, measuring body fat percentage. That's an effective way to determine it. Or maybe you were doing like hydrostatic weighing, right? Maybe you get underwater and, we know how much like, you weigh on land, and we know how much you weigh on fat, and we know how buoyant fat is. So boom, we can calculate that. Or maybe you get a DEXA scan, which is really accurate. So any of those are going to be ways for you to determine like what your client's, body fat percentage is. So once you have their body fat percentage, that's the amount of fat mass in their body expressed as a percentage of their total body weight. So if you weighed 200 pounds and you had 20% body fat, right? 200 times 0.2, that means that you have 40 pounds of fat mass on your body, right? So going at your fat mass, and that includes both your essential and your non-essential fat. Everything else would be your fat-free mass, or some, which is the weight of everything else inside the body. That's your skeletal system, that's your muscle, any of the water that's in your body, stuff like that, right? And then there is what is called your lean body mass. And your lean body mass is the portion of your body's makeup, which is all of your fat-free mass plus essential fats, right? So your lean body mass is where we take into account like all of that fat-free mass plus any of the essential fat that you do need to have in order for like physiologic function. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as brown fat, by the way, instead of like white fat. White fat is usually what you see if you ever, I mean, it's like when you look at like someone and they have like if it was like a human steak, it would be like the marbling. It's a really weird analogy, but like or weird example. But like that's, you know, generally when you look at like the body fat you have stored, that's considered white fat, but there is like essential brown fat mixed in with all of your tissues. That brown fat is going to be part of your lean body mass. One number, by the way, that is here as well to talk about is your bone mineral density. Again, that's something that you're not probably going to figure out through like traditional body scale testing, like running an electric current, but it can be very much seen with like a DEXA test. DEXA scans, which we'll talk about in just a minute, they use X-rays. So that's actually going to tell you the mineral density of someone's bone. And so like if you had a client who, you know, is really heavy, but maybe they also have really dense bones, you know, that's a good thing, you know, or the opposite could be true. This is why we see low body weight associated with osteoporosis and osteopenia. Normal body fat percentage, right, is the amount of fat mass expressed as a percentage of the overall body weight. For normal, that's going to be men anywhere from 10 to 20, and for women, that's going to be 18 to 28. Now, for athletes, these numbers are going to be a little bit shifted. Athletes are obviously a very special population, so that's going to be closer to about like 5 to 19% for athletes. Sometimes you'll see men with incredibly low body fat percentages, and women anywhere from 7 to 20. Very common if you look at like Olympic athletes, you know. You look at like some of the body fat percentage associated with some of these people, you can clearly see it's, you know, there's not exactly a lot of extra tissue sitting around the body, right? I mean, like look at, you know, this is pretty much muscle mass and there's not a lot of fat there. Unless you look at like certain, I mean, freaking Usain Bolt. Wonder what his body fat percent, I wouldn't be surprised if it was freaking like 4%. That guy was shredded. Or even like if you look at like Michael Phelps, right? Really low body fat percentage. So we will sometimes see those ranges below that. So that's something to not necessarily be too freaked out about. So I wanted to show you kind of an example here, an example client. If we were calculating out all of those specific statistics for her, all we need, we can, you know, first we can get some of it through interview. We're like, what's your name? Name's Sally. What's your age? 34 years old. What's your height? 5'8". And then we put them on a scale and we measure their weight. And so that will tell us, you know, some of their statistics. And then we can calculate out and we can put them through either like a, you know, a bioelectric impedance scale. Maybe we do hydrostatic weighing, whatever we end up doing. But it will tell us their body fat percentage. So she weighs 195 pounds and she has a body fat percentage of 28%, right? So 195 times 0.28, that means that she has 54.6 pounds of fat mass on her body. So we calculated it out and we said, okay, you have 55 pounds of fat mass on your body. She weighs 195 pounds minus 55. That gives us 140 pounds for her lean body mass. So now, let's say we've been training Sally for 6 weeks and she has dropped a couple pounds, right? She doesn't weigh 195 anymore. Now she weighs 185. Let's say she's dropped 10 pounds in 6 weeks, right? So now she's 185 pounds. We put her on the body fat scale. And let's say her body fat percentage is now only 27%. Okay, so she lost 10 pounds and 1% body fat. So we take 185 times 0.2 times 0.27 for 27%. That means that she has 49.95 pounds of fat mass. So that's going to be 50 pounds of fat mass, right? So she was 185 minus 50. Oops, 185 minus 50. That means that now, wait, what did I do wrong here? So she has 55 pounds. So she's lost 5 pounds of fat mass. Oh, I'm looking, I was using 140. That's so dumb. Why did I do that? 185 minus 50. No, minus 50. Good Lord. Hit the right buttons. I hate math day so much. I'm so sorry, guys. This is just not what I'm good at teaching. 185 minus 50. So that gives her 135 pounds of lean body mass. So now, when we start looking at this, right, if we were analyzing our client Sally, right, she has lost, right, 5 pounds of fat mass, but she has also lost 5 pounds of lean body mass. So some of that could be water. You know, lean body mass does have all of your body water in there as well. But that's kind of indicating that chances are we lost a little bit of muscle mass. So if I were working with Sally and I was like, hey, congratulations on losing 10 pounds, you know, however, I would probably say one of the things we're looking at though is that we're seeing like an even distribution. You're losing like 50% body weight, 50% fat mass. That's not a super ideal ratio. Ideally, we would lose most of our weight from body fat. So now it's like maybe we actually need to increase your protein intake to make sure you're getting adequate protein. If we look at their diet and we see that they are getting adequate protein, maybe it's like, okay, well, maybe we just need to increase your calories. Sounds like your body is going into starvation mode. And so it is getting rid of the thing that's burning the most energy. It's getting rid of body fat. Muscle mass in addition to getting rid of body fat, right? And that's not what we're going for. We want to maintain our muscle mass. So we should probably be a little bit less aggressive about how we cut our calories. Let's add 100 calories back in this week and see if this has like a positive benefit, right? And then we would measure our client Sally again next week to see how it goes. Does that make sense to everybody? I got so lost in the weeds there with the freaking numbers. Everybody following this so far? Bay's good. Lorianne, Cody. I'm really like
good.
Okay. I'm really like this is my freaking kryptonite in terms of like teaching stuff is just whenever I'm like doing math. Just not my strength. Like I said, there's a lot of different methods for calculating body fat percentage out there. The most accurate is probably like DEXA scanning or hydrostatic weighing. But hydrostatic weighing, this is a really simple way to calculate out someone's body fat percentage, but it involves weighing your client while they are completely immersed in water, right? So you basically take your client, dunk them underwater, and you weigh them on land first, and then you weigh them underwater. We know how much fat weighs underwater, right? So the more fat someone has, because fat is very buoyant, right? When you look at like oil in water, right, what happens? It always goes to the top, right? Because it is not buoyant. Or I'm sorry, because it is very buoyant, right? And so the same thing happens. The higher body fat percentage you have, the more likely you are to float when you are underwater. So if you weighed this many pounds on land and this many pounds on water, you know, I'm going to pick some fake numbers here because I have no idea what the actual weight would be. But let's say you had somebody who weighs 200 pounds on land and then they weigh, 180 pounds underwater, right? Maybe that tells us that their body fat percentage is 20%. Then you have a client who weighs 200 pounds on land and they weigh like 190 pounds in water. So they're a little like 10 pounds heavier. Maybe that indicates that that person has like 10% body fat, right? So, because they're heavier underwater, we know that they are more dense, which means they have less body fat tissue making up their overall weight. So that's kind of cool. And that involves just like some very quick, easy math, which is why underwater weighing is considered to be very, very accurate. Luckily, the machine will do all the math for you. It would be very inaccurate if I was calculating it. There is also this method, which is okay. This, honestly, you don't see it very often. It's just not done very often for like adults and stuff, but it's called air displacement plethysmography. And basically what that is sometimes you'll see what's called the body egg, which is this machine that you, okay, well, first off, that's incredible. So you will see, or the bod pod is sometimes what this is called, but you'll throw somebody in this like little egg machine here. And basically it's measuring their body fat percentage by how much air resistance there is. You know, we know that fat is kind of squishy. And so when like there's a less resistance, that's going to indicate a higher body fat percentage. Then there's DEXA scanning. DEXA scanning is really accurate, really good stuff here. Where you actually use low-grade X-rays. So they actually are using an X-ray machine, but it's like really low radiation X-rays to calculate out body fat percentage, right? So you can see here, basically you put your client in this little thing here, and then this is the X-ray, and it just goes top to bottom doing like a scan, and it kind of shows you like what someone's body composition looks like, right? And it can use that to calculate out body fat percentage. And the benefit here is that it can also indicate like their bone mineral density. So again, we can see the difference between like normal versus like bone that has maybe osteoporosis. And then probably the most common that is most popular is bioelectric impedance. Bioelectric impedance, sending an electric current through the body, right? When you look at like, if you go to Amazon and get, if you look up like a body fat scale, you know, you'll see like one of these scales that has like the little electrodes on it, right? And they're fairly accurate. They're not exactly great though. Like they're not, you know, perfect. There's some other really good ones though. Bioelectric impedance. We get like really specific about it. You'll see like, here's this version, which has like, you know, a handheld thing that basically like, you know, it's attached to this little wire here. And so now you've got like 6 points of contact instead of just like the typical scale. That's going to be a little bit more accurate. But still like bioelectric impedance can be flawed because the way this works is it's just sending an electric current from point A to point B, right? And we know how fast electric currents travel through water. And we know how much water is in like muscle mass. So when you say, hey, I weigh this many pounds, you tell the scale how much you weigh, and then or you know, the scale is measuring you, and then it runs an electric current from point A to point B. If that current travels really slowly, fat is considered an insulator. So it actually slows that electric current down. But water is a conductor, so water tissue is going to speed it up. So if the signal travels really quickly, that indicates that most of your body tissue is water-based, and you know, not very much of it is fat-based. So that's going to indicate a lower body fat percentage. But if that current travels really quickly or really slowly, that's going to indicate that like there's more insulated material there, which is slowing the signal down. That indicates a higher body fat percentage. So that is how bioelectric impedance works. And then there is also skin fold caliper measurement, right? So a skin fold caliper is this instrument that basically measures body fat percentage by looking at the thickness of your subcutaneous or, you know, skin body fat, right? So when we look at like skin fold calipers, there's a lot of different ones out there. The ones that were in your bags probably look something like this. These are pretty good. Basically the way this works is like you can see as it's pinching, right? And then there's this little like, you put this all the way over to this side, and then you pinch. And then what happens is you're actually going to grab right here. This little like, this has like a specific amount of tension, and then it fits into this little hole, but the hole is almost smaller than like the little knob. So what happens is like you're pressing and it doesn't like click in, and then you're pressing, it doesn't click in. That's indicating like, that there's not a lot of like skin fold resistance there. But then all of a sudden it gets to this one point where it goes and it kind of snaps, right? And it'll kind of click in. Once it clicks in, that's where you stop pinching. And then that tells you what their skin fold thickness is, right? Fairly accurate, although I'm not as huge a fan. Little bit more accurate is this version here, which instead of using like a little knob that kind of punches in, this version is just using a very specific amount of tension associated with a spring. So that's a little bit more accurate. And then the really accurate ones are versions like this, where there is actually a very specific amount of tension on this. And these are like $350. Very similar tech. It uses a spring as well, but is a spring that is like perfectly calibrated. Those tend to be really, really accurate. Now, in terms of like and yeah, they come in like a little box like this. In terms of like overall accuracy, skin fold measurements may seem like not a very good, there's definitely room for human error here, right? Because you could pinch too hard, like you could move the thing, but I mean, they are actually not so bad. I mean, like these formulas are pretty good. And there are a lot of different formulas out there, right? Here is like a 7-site method. NASM is going to recommend that you use what's called the Dernan formula, which is a 4-site method. So you're going to, not Jackson Pollock, that's a 3-site method. Give me the picture. Show me the friggin'. I'll be honest, NASM's is the only one that uses it. That's why I'm actually not seeing this up here. Dernan-Wamersley formula. So Dernan-Wamersley, it's a 4-site method. Okay, you do it just above the iliac crest, so just above the knob on the pelvis, just below the subscapular, the apex of your scapula, and then middle of the biceps, middle of the triceps. And that's the 4-site method. It's quick, it's easy, it's fairly accurate, So what you do is just add up all the numbers and then look at your client's age, and on the chart, it will tell you what their body fat percentage is. So like I said, NASM is going to recommend, if you do this, the Dernan-Wamersley formula: biceps, triceps, subscapular, and iliac crest. And that's what that kind of looks like. You can see there's the body fat pinch right there, right? Fat surrounding the tissue, and then we pinch it, and then we measure like how much is here. And like I said, that one's like, it can be very inaccurate if there's a lot of human error, but like when you get somebody who really knows what they're doing, it's actually not bad. So looking at body composition, we've been talking a lot about it today. Why is it so important? Well, we do know that it is related to, athletic performance, right? Like if there's a lot of like, if you're an athlete trying to run from point A to point B, and you have like a heavier body, that's going to take a lot more energy for you to move that body, right? So there are definitely some factors there that contribute to this, but there are other things that contribute to your body fat percentage as well, such as your friggin' genetics, right? That's probably the biggest one, like gaining muscle mass is difficult for me. It's just not in my physiology, like I've gotten like my hormones tested before. Your boy does not have a lot of testosterone. There's just not a lot of it running through the body. And so like gaining muscle mass, not something that comes very naturally for me, I got my dad's side of those genes more so than my mom. My mom's side, you look at all my uncles, they are massive muscular dudes. My cousins, all very, very muscular. I definitely got the Thompson side of things instead of the Benson side of things. So that is, that's going to indicate body composition sometimes. And then obviously there's a difference between like your muscle and your fat distribution. The one part of me that is incredibly muscular is my legs. I shouldn't say I have low muscle actually. Like my legs, I have huge legs in comparison to like the rest of my body, So there's definitely some factors there. So your sports performance is not only going to be indicated by like your fat mass or your fat-free mass or anything like that, but it is something to take into account. So it is something that we are going to calculate. Like I said, generally athletes, you're going to see lower body fat percentages, anywhere from 5 to 19 or 7 to 20% for female clients, right? Okay, shifting gears. Any questions on that so far? Questions or comments? Funny quips? All right, so let's talk about energy balance. We got to do more math. I'm sorry. Looking at energy balance, right? So when we're talking about energy balance, we are basically describing the first law of thermodynamics, or at least how the first law of thermodynamics like affects everything. So the first law of thermodynamics, by the way, is part of like the universe that we live in. And basically what this states is that that's actually totally like a very technical version. Let's be a little bit more simple about it. The amount of energy in a closed system will always remain constant. So what that states is that like everything that exists has existed, and everything that will exist is what has existed, right? Like, like there's nothing that gets deleted, right? And it sounds really obvious, that actually makes a lot of sense when you think a little bit more deeply about it. But like, yes, when you like, if you see somebody smoke a cigarette, you're like, oh, you made the cigarette disappear. And it's like, actually what you did is you scattered the atoms just around everywhere else. You convert it into like heat energy, like from like the flame. Some of those particles are stuck in your lungs now. Some of those particles are just floating around the earth. But either way, it existed, so it cannot be deleted. The exact same amount of energy that was present in that cigarette is still present. When you burn like a log and it burns up, yeah, you turn a lot of it into heat energy, but that heat energy is still, exists. It just exists somewhere else. Okay, so the amount of energy exists somewhere. Now remember, calories are a measurement of energy. So when you bring calories into your body, they are not going to go anywhere unless you turn them into a new tissue, or if you convert them into like mechanical energy and heat energy, right? So when you do stuff, right? When you do stuff, it takes energy for you to be able to do all that, right? So you are converting burritos into squats, right? Like that's literally what we're talking about when we're talking about energy balance. Now, when we are describing this to our clients, we don't have to get quite so heady about it, right? We're just going to explain to them that it's like you are either going to be in a positive energy balance, a neutral energy balance, or a negative energy balance. A positive energy balance is where the amount of energy coming in is greater than the amount of energy going out. So that means that it is something that is adding to something else, right? Just like think about your bank account, right? If you are spending $1,000 a month, but you are making $1,200 a month, the amount of money going into your account is $200 greater than the amount of money going out of your account, right? The energy going in is positive. Okay, so a positive energy balance is a state in which the total calories consumed are greater than the total calories expended. This will result in weight gain. Always. This conversation's over. Like, I know that like this doesn't always feel true, but I promise you, like it is all a matter of energy balance. Now you might be saying like, I've tried to put on muscle before and I've eaten lots of calories. Well, chances are the reason you didn't, put on body weight is because when you increased your calories, your body found a new way to burn those calories off. You had a lot more energy, started bouncing your leg a little bit more, started taking the stairs without realizing it, parking further away in grocery stores and parking lots, whatever, right? Like, doesn't matter what it is, your body found a way to, or maybe it just increased your like overall metabolic rate. That also will do it. Um, that is going to, result in you getting back to a neutral energy balance. Now that is usually the problem that we don't hear people describe very often, except for when we're talking about like hard gainers. But then we also have a negative energy balance, which is all about weight loss. And this is what oftentimes our clients are sort of hiring us to develop for them, right? They want us to give them a negative energy balance, right? So this is where it's a state in which the total calories consumed are less than the calories expended. That's going to result in weight loss. You are, again, turning all the energy you brought in, but then you are expending more. So let's say you bring in, go back to our bank account analogy, right? You bring in $1,000 income, but you spend $1,200. That means that like you are negative $200 in the hole. So where'd that $200 come from? Well, the bank covered you, to pay for that, whatever you paid for. And now you got to pay an overdraft fee, and the bank wants that $200 back plus some extra. Luckily, our body doesn't work that way. But when you end up in a negative energy balance, if you bring in 1,000 calories, and you burn 1,200 calories, your body will get, your body isn't like a car. When your car runs out of gas, it stops moving, right? Your body, when it runs out of gas, will go, all right, I need gas. Where can I get it from? Oh, that's right. I stored all that glycogen earlier. So it'll tap into that. Or it'll say, oh, that's all right. I've been storing body fat for years now, right? And it's going to tap into that energy. So that is where your energy is coming from when you are on a calorie deficit, when you are on a weight loss routine, right? You are in a negative energy balance, which is going to result in a loss of body fat and a loss of everything. By the way, it's not always just body fat. Sometimes it's water weight. Sometimes it's muscle mass. Be aware of that as well. And I know again, like it doesn't feel accurate sometimes. Like you're going to talk to clients and they're like, I did everything I was supposed to do and I still didn't lose weight. I stuck to my diet. And it's like, well, chances are you didn't actually do everything you were supposed to do. Your body found a way to slow down the amount of energy that it was burning. It either slowed your metabolism down, which is rare, by the way. People always jump to that conclusion. That one is actually very rare. And even the amount that it does happen is like minimal. Or your body just found a way for you to burn less energy, right? You stopped taking the stairs as much. You sat a little bit more like on the couch. You're a little bit exhausted, right? Like I had a hard time like getting enough food in yesterday. And like, it was so fun after the evening class, like it was like 7:30. And I remember just like sitting down afterwards and just being exhausted. And I totally just like fell asleep in my chair. Not this chair, but that my little reading chair. And like, I just like passed out. I like woke up like 40 minutes later and it was like, man, like that's the equivalent of like, we're in LA right now. Everybody's running their air conditioning. We're in a negative energy balance, right? The amount of energy going out is crazy. So what keeps happening? We experience rolling blackouts, like that's what happened to my body yesterday. My body was like, we don't have the energy, like it just shut down for a little while to conserve some energy. If I were on a fat loss routine, if I were on a cutting routine, that would not be so great, like that would indicate that's like, hey, like, I'm not getting enough calories. That'd be great if I'm trying to like cut, but like in that case, like, that might put me, if I'm on like a cut, that might put me back into like a neutral energy balance. And that's not where we want to be. We want to be in a negative energy balance if we're going to try to lose weight. So there's a lot of influences, right? There's a lot of things that will influence your energy intake, right? Some of it's physiologic, right? Like hunger levels and things like that. Some of it's social, right? Certain people, their energy intake is my roommate, for instance. I mean, he has some meals, but he's in meetings all day. Like his he runs a charity, so his job is to like meet with people constantly for lunch and have meetings. So he's constantly going out to eat, having no idea how much energy he's bringing in. So if he's consuming too much energy, right, that's going to result in weight gain. So social is definitely a big part of it. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes people are emotional eaters. That is absolutely a big one. And then there are straight up hunger levels. So talking about the concept of what did we call satiety, or how satisfied or how satiated someone is, right? So satiety is the level of satisfaction an individual gets in relation to hunger. So for instance, like this protein shake right here, it's not bad, but it's pretty much just protein. It's protein mixed in with water, This leaves me feeling a little full, but it's not like incredibly satiating. If I wanted to be like fully satiated, what I would do is I would mix that with like almond milk or something. It would have a few more calories in it, maybe a little bit of fat, a little bit of fiber, something that's going to leave me feeling fuller for longer. By being a more complex meal, it's going to like leave me feeling fuller. So that's the thing, right? And it's also just like a thicker liquid that's harder for the body to process, that leads to feelings of like fullness, right? So when you think about like how satiety works, right? You'll start with like a hunger signal, right? That determines like, hey, we should start eating. And then you eat, and now suddenly your body feels full. So you are satisfied and satiated. And then like that in between section is like, all right, I'm starting to get hungry. Let's eat again, right? So this is basically the hunger loop there. Now, understanding that is one of the things that's going to be very effective for helping our clients understand weight loss, right? So satiety, the level of satisfaction related to hunger, if you have low hunger, you are very satiated. Hunger is the result of this lack of satiety. So how do we control this? Well, some of it is controlled by hormones, these two right here called leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is a hormone that triggers sensations of feeling full. Your body generates this hormone. Have you guys ever heard the phrase, they say, like it takes like food, they'll say like it takes food 25 minutes to get to your stomach. And so like if you eat really fast, you're more likely to overeat because your body did not know, it's not getting signals saying that it's full. You'll hear that sometimes. What they're describing is they're describing your ghrelin production. If you are not, I'm sorry, your leptin production. When your body starts eating, it produces leptin in response. The more leptin you generate, the more full you will feel. And then there is also ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hormone that triggers sensations of hunger, right? So if you are not getting enough food, your body will generate some ghrelin. Easy way to remember this is your stomach is growling. That's how I always remember it. But that's what leptin and ghrelin are. These are two of your hunger hormones. If you are on like a weight loss routine, chances are you want to do things that leave you feeling as full as possible. This is why eating multiple times, like frequently small meals throughout the day, often leads to people like more successfully sticking to a weight loss routine, because they find it much easier to stay on that routine. They find it way easier to, feel like they're getting enough food all the time. They're satiated consistently. Now, obviously, the components of our energy expenditure, there's a lot of them, right? There's the first and biggest one is going to be your resting metabolic rate, or your basal metabolic rate, right? This is the number of energies that you burn simply by existing, but then there's also like, processing food does take energy. Your body has to expend some calories to extract the energy from food. You got to spend a little bit of money to make a little bit of money, right? So that's the thermic effect of foods, the amount of energy that we use to like process things. And then there's the number of calories that are burning as the result of like processing that, like protein, for instance. Protein is like protein is the hardest for your body to break down, so it expends a lot of energy, which is why high protein diets are usually what we see on like a weight loss routine. And then there's also the thermic effective activity. You moving around is going to burn a little bit more energy. So this is sort of a pie chart of that's kind of representing our energy expenditures here. 15 to 30% of it's going to be your physical activity. 60 to 75% of it's going to be your resting energy expenditure or your basal metabolic rate. And then about 10% of it's going to be like food that you're actually consuming. So we are going to need to calculate how much energy someone is bringing in order to put them into either a positive or a negative energy balance. So today we're going to be looking at the REE method, right? This is the amount of energy expended by an individual at rest, which can be multiplied by an activity factor to actually determine your caloric needs. So your resting energy expenditure for men is this formula right here. And for women, it's this formula right here. So we go back to our example client, Sally, from earlier, right? Sally is 34 years old. She's 5'8". She weighs 195 pounds. That's all the information I need to calculate her resting energy expenditure. So we go 655 plus, and it's 9.6 times her weight in kilograms, plus 1.8 times her weight. I'm sorry, her height in centimeters. I was like, that's not right. What's up, babe? We lost you for a sec.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
That's okay. Don't sweat it. So we see like 655 plus 9.6 times her weight in kilograms, which was 88, plus 1.8 times her weight. I'm sorry, her height in centimeters. And then we subtract 4.7 times her age in years. And that will give us 655 plus 9.6 times 88 plus 1.8 times 173 minus 4.7 times 34. And there we go. So her resting energy expenditure is 1,651 calories per day, right? So that's how many calories Sally burns at rest, right? That's her resting energy expenditure. Obviously, she is going to be, slightly more active than that, right? Maybe she is, maybe she is moving around a little bit more, right? So that is, by the way, this is the Harris-Benedict formula. This formula right here. Look at, there's other formulas, right? There's the DRI method, which is actually the one that I like the most. There's the REE method, which is named after the resting energy expenditure. And then there's the Cunningham equation. Cunningham is actually pretty accurate as well, because that one takes into account fat-free mass. So we'd actually have to go back to Sally's fat-free mass, right, of 140 pounds. 140 in time, that's in kilograms. So 140 divided by 2.2, right? So then that would be 500 times 22 plus 500. So this actually gives Sally 1,900, which is a little bit higher, right? And that's, I think we had, that's relatively high body fat percentage. So not, I don't know, not bad, but maybe not perfect either. That's a difference of 250 calories. So which formula is best? Well, that's really hard to determine. There's a lot of formulas out there. All of them are going to be around the same numbers, but it's designed to give you a basic idea. What you need to do is you need to calculate your numbers for your clients, give them a calorie goal, have them do it for a little while, and then see if it's working. If it's working, great, leave it alone. If it's not working, let's lower it down, or, whatever we have to do, make adjustments. So she burns 1,651 calories per day. And then to figure out how many calories she actually burns in a day, because that's her resting, right? To figure out how many she actually burns in a day, we would take this number and we would multiply it by, whatever activity factor we choose. So maybe it's 1,651 times 1.6. So maybe she's actually burning closer to like 2,600 calories per day. If we put her on a calorie, if we're like, hey, we know there's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, right, guys? So 3,500 divided by 7 days per week, that means she needs 500 calories below that number every day. So again, 1,651 times 1.6 minus 500. So if she were to consume 2,146 calories, she might lose a pound a week. And so if I put her on that routine and she doesn't lose any weight, well, then I need to make an adjustment. Me personally, what I recommend, guys, I don't make adjustments more than like 100 to maybe 100, maybe to 200 calories per week. So I would say, all right, let's lower another 100 calories off of this, right? And then all of a sudden, if the weight starts coming off, it's like, okay, that's our perfect number. We know weight loss is obviously a combination of like dietary, and that's the other thing is like, could you just keep lowering the calories down? Yeah, you could, or you could also try to increase the caloric expenditure, right? It's not always about just like reducing calories. Sometimes it's about increasing calories, to get that equation, right? So you could cut calories. Yeah, that's going to help you lose weight possibly, but you could also just increase how much you move. That will also have the same effect, So when we look at this, right, there is like, we call this weight cutting, right? It's the practice of losing weight in preparation for like a competition. You'll hear about cutting diets, right? You look at a cutting routine and you'll see, it's like, a 10 to 25% calorie deficit, right? And you are focusing on like strength training with like plenty of cardio versus like bulking, which is like a 10 to 20% calorie surplus, right? And those are just kind of flat numbers. I'm not necessarily saying those are the perfect numbers, but that's kind of the difference there, right? We're definitely seeing the difference between, a cutting routine versus like a bulking routine. However, there's some issues that come along with this. Obviously, there's like the social anxiety that kind of comes along with it. And this can lead to disordered eating. So we do need to be cautious when we're talking to our clients about this calorie stuff. Sometimes it can lead to eating disorders, right? There's anorexia, which is the extreme fear of becoming obese. And so people will simply avoid food entirely. Anorexia is indicated by not eating, okay? There's also bulimia, which is basically where someone will eat very little food, oftentimes associated with anorexia. Then what will happen is they will get extremely hungry, and so they will binge. This often causes feelings of guilt or feelings of anxiety, which so then they will find a way to get that food back out of their body. And they're trying to get rid of that energy, and they'll do this through the use of like some type of purging method, either through throwing up or through like diuretics. It's got to get out of the body somehow, right? So it's a large number of calories consumed, but then they are creating a calorie deficit, not in a very healthy way. Sometimes also like part of anorexia and bulimia will also be just extreme amounts of exercise, right? Like trying to burn an excessive amount of calories per day. And then there's also another disordered eating is just binge eating disorder. This is sometimes associated with our obese clientele, and feelings of unable to control how much they are eating, right? They are going to binge super large quantities of food. This is really, bad for us because like the problem with eating too much food, another reason why like eating small meals frequently throughout the day, one of the reasons why it works is because not so much because like it's burning more calories or anything like that, but because like when you consume a large number of calories, your ability to goof up and make a mistake and consume too many calories happens much more frequently. You are more likely to consume calories without realizing it, right? It's just like one of the reasons why, like one of the tips that I give my clients when they're trying to lose weight is like, if you're going to eat like potato chips or popcorn or anything like that, put it into a bowl. Do not eat it out of the bag, because you will see it disappear and you'll be aware that like, oh, I finished that meal. It becomes conscious instead of subconscious, right? That's one of the reasons why eating small meals is so effective. You become conscious of what you're intaking instead of unconscious of it. So that's binge eating disorder. There's also anorexia athletica. This is very similar to, this is a subset of regular anorexia, but it's associated with like, athletics, like specifically athletes. Just a couple years ago, he got fired, but like Nike, there was this girl came out with this article here back in 2019. So she was the fastest girl in the US. I think I want to say she was a mid-distance runner, 5K. That's weird. I don't know why it's not saying, but she was a really young athlete. And she was like this is sad to say, Oregon, damn it. Oregon's like Nike running project. And this guy, Alberto Salazar, who had like, he was the one who ran their running program up there. He like encouraged her not to eat because he was trying to get her body weight really, really low. And it ruined her hormonally. It ruined like her muscle mass. She didn't perform as well in athletics, and they were like constantly like, well, you got to be lighter. You weigh too much. And that's why, you are not able to run fast enough. And it's like, with more muscle mass, she may have been able to run faster, so like not a very good run. I mean, this guy was a pretty famous coach and, considered one of the best. And what's a bummer is like, Nike fired him, but like his assistant took over, and it's like, chances are he's running the same program. I don't have confirmation of that, so, don't quote me on that, but, so eating disorders, very, very dangerous, very, very bad for us. It obviously is going to decrease your fat mass, which, like I said, is going to have certain hormonal problems. We need fat mass. It helps regulate our body temperature. It will slow down your basal metabolic rate. If you do not, your body will try to conserve calories as best it can. It can result in dehydration because you're just not bringing in food, and food is a substantial way that we get water in every day. Glycogen depletion because you're not bringing in carbohydrates. Like I said, hormonal disturbances, poor exercise performance. It can lead to arrhythmias and anxieties and insomnia because your body produces so many stress hormones, overuse injuries, and then decreased concentration. It will lead to just like irritability. Everybody's cranky on a diet. I've read enough Garfield comics to know, it leads to being very, very cranky. Sometimes you will also see what is called the female athlete triad. This is highly associated with disordered eating. Disordered eating, by the way, probably, much, much more common in women's populations. But what you will see is like disordered eating will lead to a lack of calories, which can lead to like osteoporosis. And that can also lead to what is called amenorrhea, which is basically like a loss of the menstrual cycle because of like a complete disruption of how much estrogen can be created. So without enough estrogen in the body, that can be, really, really have negative effects on like our female athletes. Now there is also on the flip side of things being like, what is called muscle dysmorphia. And dysmorphia is just a distorted body image, right? This is like seeing yourself having like a really intense preoccupation with like something that you are dissatisfied with. Sometimes you'll see like body dysmorphia where somebody will be worried about like, it's interesting. They'll be worried about like their skin. And so they'll like constantly preoccupy over like a zit, and they'll pick at it, and and they'll get infected, and then that causes more problems, and they have like even more skin problems, and it's just like a vicious cycle. Sometimes people just not seeing them, body dysmorphia is what leads to anorexia or bulimia, but there can also be muscle dysmorphia where people are like, they don't see themselves as big enough, right? This can be seen in like male bodybuilders most commonly, but really it can be any bodybuilder. Jay Cutler is really famous for this. He has talked about his muscle dysmorphia. This guy right here felt that he was scrawny. And he saw himself as being like way not muscular enough, and so he would constantly do things that would, the reason this is bad for us is because it would lead to doing, taking actions to get results that are maybe unrealistic or unsafe, and Jay Cutler, he would use steroids and other things, and stuff that is very harmful and dangerous for us. So how do we prevent this kind of stuff? Well, this is another reason why we want to take multiple data points with our clients, right? Take the emphasis off body weight, take the emphasis off body composition. Be like, hey, let's not look at this. Let's look at athletic performance, right? Let's not feed into like fad diets, right? Or crash diets. Instead, let's focus on healthy eating behaviors, right? Try to develop like an environment that is going to lead to like healthy eating behaviors rather than unhealthy ones. And then set achievable goals rather than unrealistic ones. Like if your client's like, I want to lose 80 pounds in the next 3 months, it's like, okay, well, you're going to need to chop your legs off. That'll be a substantial amount, like that's going to be really freaking difficult, So when it comes to increasing your body weight or decreasing your body weight, if we're trying to increase body weight, we want to be in a positive energy balance. That's going to give us enough calories to add to our body. And we also want to be in a positive nitrogen balance. We want to make sure we're getting enough protein like we talked about earlier. So eat numerous meals throughout the day. That's going to ensure that you're getting plenty of calories. Drink plenty of juices. That can be a great way to increase your calories. Cut back on the fluids during your meals. That makes it a little easier to eat larger quantities of food. Consume calorie supplement drinks like, protein shakes are a really good source of just immediate calories that are very convenient. That's why I like them. Late night snacking. And then there are like certain supplements and protein bars and things like that you can take. That's if you're trying to increase your weight. Decreasing your weight, we're going to try to figure out a way to increase our energy expenditure, right? So summary, athletes are obviously concerned about like weight loss and body composition because it is related to their field. We need to calculate what their normal ranges are through like looking at analyzing their BMI and their, whether or not they are overweight or obese. And then measure their body composition using a lot of different methods, right? Body composition assessments through like body fat testing, waist circumference measurements, waist to hip ratios, and then obviously like just BMI. And then, like I said, eating disorders are really common. Like if you spend all your time focusing on this body weight stuff, it could lead to unrealistic expectations. So that can be very, very dangerous. Any questions on anything we talked about so far, guys?
No.
All righty. So let's take a look at something kind of cool today. I got a special little handout for you guys, which is this little worksheet that I created a long time ago that will help you determine your calorie needs. And it will also be used to help determine like your macronutrient needs. So this little worksheet right here, first thing you're going to do is you're going to figure out what your protein intake needs to be. So you need to determine, how do you see yourself as an athlete? Do you see yourself as a sedentary, strength athlete, or an endurance athlete, right? And what that's going to mean is, how much protein you intake. If you're sedentary, you only need about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. But chances are we're all strength athletes in here, so it might be closer to 1.2 or 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. So let's say it was Let's say you have somebody who weighs 200 pounds divided by 2.2. So that means they weigh 90.9 kilograms. If we multiply that by 1.7, that means that they need about 154 to 155 grams of protein per day. Okay. So now I've already figured out their protein intake at 150 grams. I can come back to that later. Now I got my recommended carbohydrate intake, which is 45 to 65% of their total calories, or it could be 6 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if we wanted them on a super low carb diet, right? They weighed 91 kilograms times 6. That'd be 546 grams. That actually seems like a lot. Did I have that right? 200. Yeah, 545 grams. That's a lot. And then maybe they, fat intake is 20 to 25%. There's actually not like a number of grams for that one. Now we know that there are 9 calories in a gram of fat, 4 calories in a gram of carbohydrates, and 4 calories in a gram of protein. So now we have all the information to help us do all this math. So then what you're going to do is you're going to actually calculate out your daily caloric needs. What's up, Lorian? So we're going to calculate out what our needs are. So if I click this link right here, and it takes me to the DRI, right? Let's say it's a female client, 34 years old. Let's say she is 5'10" and weighs 189 pounds. And now I'm going to determine how active this person is. Let's say she considers herself low active, right? So I hit submit here, and I go down here, and there's all of her statistics, right? And that means that she burns about 2,467 calories in a given day. Now, that is not her basal metabolic rate. That's her daily caloric needs. That is how many calories she needs to maintain her body weight, right? So now I'm going to go back and calculate out what her protein needs are, right? So now that I know her calories, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate out her protein intake. So right here, her calories is 2,467, and she weighed 189 pounds. 189 divided by 2.2, that gives me 85.9 kilograms. So she weighs 86 kilograms. 86 times, and we did 1.7. So she needs 146 grams of protein per day. Boom. Done and done, right? So of her 2,467 calories, she's going to get 146 grams of protein. 146 times 4, that's 584 calories, which means that if I divide that by her, what was it, 2,467? About 23% protein, which is right in our normal healthy range, right? About 23% is what we saw there. Calculate your client's protein needs by multiplying their body weight in kilograms by the recommended protein intake that you are going to choose, right? Anywhere, you're going to choose one of these categories, and that will give you the need in grams. Now you need to figure out their carbohydrate intake. The carbohydrate intake is anywhere from 45 to 65% of their total calories. So if I knew that my client was 2,467 calories times 45%, that's times 0.45, that gives me 1,110 calories from carbohydrates every time. Now, because it's in calories first and not in grams, I need to do a little bit of extra math here. I need to determine how many grams that is. Well, how many calories are in 1 gram of carbohydrates? 4. So 1,110 divided by 4, that means she needs about 277 grams of carbs. So now she needs 146 grams of protein and 277 grams of carbs. Then I need to figure out my fat. fat is everything that is left, right? So my total calories minus the calories from protein and minus the calories from carbohydrates. And then that will give us how many calories are left for fat. So again, if I go uh, 146 times 4, that's 584 calories, plus 277 times 4, that's going to be 1,692 calories. So that is how many calories I'm getting from protein and carbs. If I subtract 1,692 from 2,467, that means she needs 775 calories from fat. 775 calories from fat. How many calories are in 1 gram of fat? There's 9. So I divide that by 9. And that means she needs 86 grams of fat. And now I have calculated out my client's macros for them that tell them exactly how many calories they need to eat. I'm sorry, how many grams of everything they need to eat per day. 146 grams of protein, 277 grams of carbs, and 86 grams of fat. Here's the thing. If she wants to stay the same. Now, if this client here wanted to lose a pound a week, I would subtract 500 calories from this number, and I would run everything that I just did again with those new numbers, right? So you need to determine what their calorie intake is first, then you figure out their protein, then their carbs, then their fat. And that's how we calculate that. And that's what you can see in a very long example here. So here's client A. They need 2,850 calories per day, right? They're a strength athlete. So we went with 1.7 for their, or sorry, we went with 1.6 for their protein multiplier, and they weigh 240 pounds. So protein intake is 174 grams. It's about 696 calories, right? How do I know it's 174 grams? Well, it's because they are 109 kilograms times 1.6. Boom, 174. I chose 1.6. Could choose 1.7, could do 1.4. You know, could pick whatever number I want to pick. So that's their protein intake, right? And then here's the math kind of showing you how it happens. So 109 times 1.6, and there we go, right? Put some bold. Then we got to figure out the carb intake. So carb intake is their number of calories they need to consume divided by 4. So what I need to do to figure this out is we need to choose a carbohydrate percentage, somewhere between 45% and 65%. We chose 50%. So 2,850, that's the total calorie intake, times 50%, which would be 1,568. And then we would divide 1,568 by 4, and that gives me 356 grams per day. There's my carb intake. Then we went with fat intake. It's whatever's left, right? So 2,850 is their total calories. There were 1,425 carb calories, 696 protein calories. That leaves me with 729 calories. I divide that by 9. That gives me 81 grams of fat. So that is how we calculated our client's macros. We went 50% and then about 25, 25 or 26, 24. So that handout's going to be available. I'm going to attach that to the email that I send you guys today, so you can take a look at it. There are other calculators out there that will do this for you, by the way. They use slightly different formulas. I don't think you need to necessarily know how to do this math on your own, but take a look, right? Our client was 34. Whoops. She was 5'10" and she weighed 189 pounds, and she was lightly active. Hit calculate. This formula was a little bit harder, right? Well, no. What was her other one? 24 something? It was close, yeah. So she needs, in order to maintain her weight, 2,480 calories. If she wants to lose weight, 2,200 calories, right? Or if she really wants to lose weight, 1,980, or if she really, 1,480. I would never do this one, by the way. That's too much. And then there's an example of like her, zigzag schedule for her. And then, we can do like a macro calculator. Where the heck is that part? Macronutrient calculator. Here it is, freaking thing. And there it is. You can put her on a balanced intake, right? Which would be something like this: low fat, low carb, high protein, or you can create your own. Be like, I want to do, this much of this, and it will move the numbers around for you. So there are calculators out there, guys. There's apps on your phone in the App Store. There's a million ways you can do this, but I did want to show you the math at least once, so that we've gone over it, so that like hopefully you can kind of see the inner workings of how those formulas work. They're not magic. And that's about it. You guys got any questions today? Lorianne, Bay, Cody, you guys feeling good?
Good, thank you.
Sorry, it was a math day, guys.
Great.
All right, good deal. This is like my kryptonite. I just don't know how to make it as interesting. And I'm just also, I get lost. I have a brain that really absorbs patterns very easily. And math has so many patterns in it that I get distracted and I'm like, oh, that's interesting connection there. And then I'm like, where was I? Yeah. So
math is hard. It's a tough one.
It's the worst. All right. See you guys tomorrow.